Hey everyone, LioConvoy here. Last time, I went through half the questions you guys asked concerning ThunderCats. I want to say I'll get through the other half this time, but you guys asked so many more questions that there will be a part 3. So if your posted question isn't answered in this video, don't worry, it'll be answered next time. If you have more questions, then go ahead and ask them in the comment section of either the previous video or this one. To make sure I don't wind up going into 6 parts here, I'll cut it off at 24 hours after this video's upload. Past that time, I'll answer questions in text instead of via a video. Let's get into it. 10 Nights asks, is there a credit for the final design of the ThunderCats, a specific artist from the original cartoon production? Most of the designs were finalized by Leonard Starr, Mike Jermicane, and with the help of Tsukiyuki Kubo. The most well-known promotional picture for the series has the characters in almost their final designs. Some changes to Lion-O and Panthro were made, and Wily Kit was added, but the biggest change you'll notice is the Sword of Omens. Originally being an arming sword in Leonard Starr's design, the final design was changed by Pacific Animation Corporation. That's why in Exodus, Jaga says this.
And these are not merely holes you see in the hilt. Looking through those magic apertures will give you sight beyond sight.
When there clearly aren't holes there, but the original design had them, hence the line. Michael Bassett asks, here's a question for Lio. How do you view the 2011 ThunderCats reboot now as compared to 9 years ago when it aired? Personally, I enjoyed most of the stories and was happy with the animation. As always, thank you for your time. I view it quite a bit differently now. 9 years ago, I was far more fond of it, but as I've had more time to reflect and meditate on it, I found it has the same issues most modern ThunderCat stories have. It deviates too far from the source material and tries to be dark and gritty. The animation I generally have more nitpicks than actual critique about. Red Vitamin Blue asks, question, at what stage was Dr. Robert Cuise involved with the development of the original series? Did the writers consult him during pre-production, or did he review content after show scripts were already written and then offer his approval when he identified some thread of moral reasoning or a life lesson present in the episode? It seems in some cases he had a word in pre-production, but generally he got to handle the scripts closer to their finalization. His job was to ensure that no harmful values were taught, and that there was a lesson in every script. Stephen Perry specifically made it a point in the episode Queen of Eight Legs to make the script as challenging as possible for the Doctor to make a moral lesson out of it. Dan Lower asks, did they ever make a Phantom Jaga figure, translucent and glows in the dark? LJN never did, but Troy Parson does. I own one of his customs, and he does many variations as well as a ghost version of Groon. John Caulfield asks, why were the LJN toys so divorced from the cartoon? Was there any contact between Rankin Boss and LJN to make sure they weren't making toys for one-off characters? The contact between LJN and the scriptwriters were minimal. I detailed this more in an early video, but they were divorced so that the writing team had more creative liberty. They generally only interacted with the toy side of things if they thought something was neat enough or imaginative enough to be included in the show. LJN actually made quite a few figures that were just one-off characters, such as Mongor. Capt G asks, how about the visuals from the opening credits? Most 80s cartoons had good ones, but ThunderCats was one of the best ever. Who and how did the sequence come about? The animated sequence was done by Tsukiyuki Kubo and another animator only credited as Mazuki. The music was done by Bernard Hoffer and lyrics by Jules Bass. I'm not sure how that specific sequence came about though, as the script for Exodus has a completely different opening detailed. I'll leave a link to the text for that in the description. Dragoiv80 asks, were all the good ThunderCats meant to have a light-up feature or only Lion-O? No, just Lion-O from what I can tell. Saturday Morning Fan asks, ThunderCats Ho! The movie was of course a 2-hour TV movie later split into 5 parts. From what I heard at one point, they were even thinking of releasing it to theaters as a movie. They even did a book and recorded it in the UK, and yes, like Secret of the Sword, started out as a TV miniseries first, but got cold feet after other animated films did not do well and scrapped the big screen release idea, making it a 2-hour TV movie. Is this true or a myth? If true, do you think it would have done good in the theaters, or would it have bombed had it got a big screen release? I've also heard that rumor, that it was originally meant to be a theatrical release at some point. However, Hear the Roar makes no such mention of it. So I'm going to presume going forward that it's more of an urban legend than anything. But let's say in this case, hypothetically it was. I absolutely believe the cold feet would have been warranted due to what Transformers the movie did to the market. Keep in mind, there was also supposed to be a sequel to the first DuckTales movie and a Rescue Rangers movie that never saw the light of day due to that event. So unfortunately, I don't think a ThunderCats movie would have gone well either. David McSwain asks, who came up with the episode of King Arthur and Excalibur in it? Love this episode, especially when Excalibur and the Sword of Omen started battling themselves without their respective wielders. Peter Lawrence did the script for this. He's a man well versed in Arthurian lore, so he figured it'd be fun. Interestingly enough, the original notes state that the part you like so much wasn't originally supposed to happen. Lion-O and Arthur were supposed to have a sword fight, but the sword's powers weren't to be used. It was just supposed to be a test of pure skill. Ashraf Morad asks, as much as I was a fan of the original toy line for the show, and still am, I look back on it now and wonder if because the original 1980 show predated the toys by a few years, did the advent of the toys and the need to promote these toys in the cartoon lead to the original run's eventual decline? I don't think the toys came later years after the show's release, and the toys rarely played a part in the show's direction. Were that the case, we'd likely see the Stinger in the show, or the toys would have produced more characters like Snarfer and the Lunatacs. So I doubt toy sales were the reason for the show's cancellation. Jeff Jones asks, I guess my best question would be, I know first the animated series had a psychiatrist as an advisor to make sure the series didn't do anything that could possibly cause harm to young children, but the 2011 series, they had realistic events, like the bombing in the first episode. Did they still have an advisor, or were they marketing to more mature audiences like some anime series, like Beast King Go Lion? Firstly, I don't believe the 2011 series had more realistic events than the original, but as far as I know, there was no advisor for the 2011 series. But I would like to take a moment and talk about your comment about Go Lion. Go Lion wasn't made for a more mature audience. It was made for kids. Yes, all that violence and strangeness is absolutely permitted for children in Japan. Go Lion is a super robot show, and they've always been known for hyper-violence dating back to Mazinger and Getter Robo in the 70s. Japan has less restriction than America does for what its kids consume in fiction. Night Mode asks, why was the show/toy line cancelled? One can assume declining sales, but I suppose there could be a more intriguing reason. I honestly don't know for sure. Even Hear the Roar doesn't peg it out specifically from what I've seen. Ronald Franchette asks, of course the big question, did Lion-O's stasis pod actually malfunction or not? John echoes this question with, does Hear the Roar say anything about Lion-O's aging during his suspended animation? I did an entire video answering this question, but I'll give you the long and short of it here. No, in neither the series proper, nor in even the script of Exodus does a malfunctioning suspension capsule get mentioned. It's been retconned via the Wildstorm sourcebook in 2002 that the capsule malfunctioned, but not the fiction proper. Hear the Roar makes no mention of it either. Man of Action asks, the figures, and who came up with such a shoddy approach? LJN, and I'm not sure what you mean by shoddy, aside from the Battlematic actions regularly being broken because no one knew people would have them 30 plus years later. The toys are pretty solid in design. One could even argue that Mattel's approach to Motu is shoddy, reusing multiple parts in a mix and match style, but that's a subjective value. Nicholas Dickens asks, oh wow, I can't wait to watch this. I can't think of much to ask. What I would ask is some of the characters that were created cartoon, were there ever going to be figures? Like that great lady on her space cycle. I would have loved a figure of her. Because the show and the toy productions were pretty divorced, there were a lot of reoccurring characters that never got toys. Mandora being one of them. We have no indication of any toys of them either. I'd imagine Super 7 will be doing a full cast of characters though, so that's something to look at. Keith Holmesley asks, why were the figures in the original toy line so inconsistent with the sizes of the characters? They really weren't any more inconsistent than any other toy at the time. Their height differences generally match the model sheets, the main difference being the Mum-Ra's and companion Snarf. Ever-living Mum-Ra is, of course, smaller than his on-screen counterpart, while Mummy Mum-Ra version is a bit taller. Any differences seen here are likely due to comparing 3D objects to a 2D image. Mario Perez asks, what happened with the 2011 cartoon? Is there any place we can find out its final resolution? Executive meddling, not knowing who they wanted to target, and poor product quality and distribution. There's an interview with Daniel Norton that goes into the plans for a second season of the show and what it would entail. Link for that's going to be in the description. Dennis Logan asks, ThunderCats vs. Masters of the Universe. Which was a better success? I prefer ThunderCats. While I prefer ThunderCats as well, though I do love Motu, I think it's pretty obvious Motu was more successful. In terms of nerd zeitgeist, monetary gain, and continued legacy, Motu is unquestionably the winner here. Mr. D asks, I guess a lot will ask this, but I'm a big fan of the 2011 show. Why was it cancelled? What could we have seen in another season? Is there any chance for a continuation? Why was Chitara so attractive in the 2011 show? Am I a furry for thinking she's hot? What did Michael from Retro Blasting think of the 2011 show? It was cancelled mainly because Warner Brothers wanted to push a cheaper show in its stead. Legends of Chima, to be specific. The second question I answered a few questions ago. No, there's no chance for continuation. Warner Brothers will not respond to fan demands on that. I don't think Michael has seen the 2011 show. And yes, you absolutely are a furry if you think she's attractive. And you should be ashamed. Corey Pressler asks, was the Mad Bubbler figure only the prototype, or were there some produced versions? Also, how did the other two Rampagers get produced but not the Mad Bubbler who is advertised alongside them? Only a prototype. I have no idea why the others got produced and Mad Bubbler didn't. Autoronorous asks, too bad I missed the first Q&A. I had some questions and clarifications. Can you explain how and why the 2011 series got cancelled? A lot of people believe the low toy sales myth. Can you debunk this myth and set the record straight? Are there any pros and cons for the original show you can think of? Why didn't ThunderCats become as popular as He-Man and She-Ra? When you compare the animation and overall tone of the original show, ThunderCats beats Motu in these criterias. So why didn't it become as popular or equal to that of the Motu shows? Thank you. See above for your first answer. Toy sales played a factor, but it wasn't the primary one. The cons I can think of for the original show is that sometimes it went in bizarre directions due to scripts William Overgaard did. He seemed to be more interested in making new characters than the pre-existing ones. And while that got us some awesome characters like Hachiman and Mandora, it also saddled us with characters like Captain Bragg. I think the pros are the inventiveness of the ideas and being a really good blend of sci-fi and fantasy. ThunderCats didn't likely share in the same amount of popularity due to the fact that Motu was the first cartoon that really took advantage of the Reagan administration's deregulating children's programming. That combined with the speed in which they put out figures due to their sort of mix and match design made them hard to compete with. And the latter factor is where you'll see the most impact. If you join most Motu groups, you'll find there's more talk about the toys than the animation and characters. The LJ and ThunderCats line only had one reused mold here in the United States compared to the plethora in Motu's line, so it seemed to be more interested in uniqueness than pushing figures out. And you're welcome. That's 21 more questions down. The rest is up to you guys. A special thanks as always to my patrons. If you want to support me, then the link is in the description. Did I answer your questions well enough? Feel free to interact in the comments section. Until then, next time, take care.